Okay, great. Thank you for your patience.
I'll leave you guys to it.
Okay, great. Okay, looks like we've got our usual group. Thank you both for taking the time to make some progress on this. So I am going to pull up the Google document for I think I lost my tab. Sorry, the Google document that Ashira has already set up, and I'll share the link. And that way, we can, basically use that to edit live. Okay, so we'll do that. I'll share you the link. It's open to EAG members. And as always, we'll make sure we take public comment, intermittently throughout our discussion today. So I'm sticking this in the chat. Okay. Emily, Ben, are you able to see that and edit? I should make sure I can edit.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen so that it's visible. Let me just one sec. Sorry, everybody. And then what I was planning on doing, it still has the renter information, but I think what I will do is I will just sort of purge that. We've already sort of pulled all that down, and then I'll add the new information based on what Jeff sort of contributed. And I've worked on a little bit of content as well for this. So, and it looks like people can see my screen as well.
Yep.
Okay, super. Okay, so I'm just going to delete all of this. And again, we do have it. And then I am going to copy all this. Oops. From Jeff's sort of like last work on this, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay, there we go. And I don't love how Google does sort of weird things with this. So, as always, I think it's going to be kind of most helpful for, I'm just going to kind of scroll through this for the purposes of making sure it's kind of visible, but we'll go through it section by section. I think our time is most well spent, making sure that we take a look at the recommendations. I did put some content that I think will be, kind of like reorganize some of this overview and challenges stuff in the way that we've kind of done with other reports. So I wondered if it would be okay for me to like copy and paste it and we go through it sort of really quickly, and then we can always take a closer look as well at, what data. And does anyone know why it's all highlighted? I'm gonna say none. Do I need to accept it? Any thoughts on, are you all seeing it as highlighted as well?
Yes.
I'm
Is
not
somebody, sorry, Ben, I was going to say, did one of you like actually highlight it? Or is it like Control A? Or is
I
that
don't
like,
think it's highlighted. I like,
okay.
Unless like, yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's kind of, but I don't know if it's highlighted. I will try to sort of unhighlight everything, but it's okay. There we go. It took. I don't know what was going on. I don't love Google Docs, but it's great we can all be in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of stick the content I've worked on at the top, and we can just see. I deleted a few things that I felt was kind of repetitive, but I'll show you what I did and we can see. Really just an attempt to get some of this in order and be less repetitive. So let me pull up this section, and I'll kind of go through the part that I sort of covered, and then we'll kind of see where things, come in to that. So bear with me. Okay. And it's just taking a sec. Okay, so this is going to be pretty choppy and weird, but we'll persevere. Okay, so as we've done in other sections, I basically just kind of reorganized it so that the overview was shorter and that we kind of talked about, why things are challenges, like the data for challenges alongside the challenges. So so this is, pretty similar to what it was with just a little bit of context. And then I just cleaned up some of the language that our intern set up around energy burden, talking about why that was a challenge. I guess I would flag maybe this section that I'm highlighting to revisit. Like, I wanted to speak to, like, we did sort of get specific comments on energy burden. I don't think people called it that specifically, but we did get comments on that. I think we'll just have to sort of see as a placeholder where it makes sense to keep our sort of discussion of public comments in the public feedback section, or kind of refer to it sort of as relevant. So just flagging, I don't know if that's a natural home or we want to expand on it, but it felt weird to kind of just talk about the data, which is just not very, it's not as compelling as, acknowledging it or telling a story. So there's that. I put sort of a placeholder about access to debt and finances, but didn't really go into it in detail. So maybe that's something to talk about. And then I think we'll want to go back into this, but this is like the lie heap section is what was I going to say? The lie heap section is kind of a mishmash that I didn't touch a lot. So I think we'll want to talk about that. Same with the weatherization assistance program. I think Jeff had some comments, but there's not, I encouraged him to just make an executive decision, but I don't know that I didn't hear back from him. So I don't know how far he got on that. And then I just put in a section here. This is another one that sort of I did about just eligibility gaps, and basically people are falling in and out of the definition of low income based on existing programs in the clean heat standard, and that's going to be at a minimum confusing, sort of which programs people respond to. And then just here I just flagged that, like, we know some towns have higher energy burdens, and these towns have also, received less investment through things like heat pumps and things like that. So again, I think we could expand on that, but wanted to, at least since we had some citations, do that. And there's a lot of, basically footnotes that are loose from the other sections. So that's kind of, kind of like what I added so far. I just wanted to sort of, before this meeting, sort of preload stuff that was just sort of cleaning up content that I didn't think was a decision point, but we should have somebody, take another look at this. And do you remember who's assigned to do this section?
Let me
Go
see. Ahead. I have Ben as the viewer, but Mia, can you just confirm that there's like two versions of this? The first one is yours, and then it starts with the same thing underneath, and that's Jeff's.
Yeah. And I think Jeff didn't really touch that section, but so the first part was sort of my reworked version of that. And I just kind of stuck it at the middle, and I thought we could go through and like delete stuff that's repeated.
Well, so it looks like there's two copy and pastes of the same thing.
Yeah, so I went in and pasted like Jeff's, the sort of the version that was last touched by Jeff, and then I sort of pasted on top, like at the top, the sort of overview section that I did. Unless I did it.
So it's just that section that you redid.
Yeah. So
sorry.
No, I know it's super confusing, and I don't know that I have a great, a great recommendation for this, for sort of doing it. So if we feel okay with that, and again, we can keep the sort of original one for comparison, but just in the interest of kind of moving forward, if we're okay with that text, I'll kind of start moving some of the stuff. Like, we'll go through this text and sort of see, like, okay, is it already covered up there, or is this sort of new content? Does that sound okay? I know this is a weird way of doing it. So again, I think I kind of, this is all the stuff I'm highlighting is all stuff I sort of reorganized and stuck together the top, or got rid of because I thought it was too confusing or overlapped and stuff. Again, it was mostly content that I think our intern did that I didn't really have a chance to review before Jeff got it, and I don't think he responded to this section much. Besides the part about LIHEAP and the WAP program, which I didn't really touch. They're just up there in challenges, if that makes sense. So I don't want to be heavy-handed with editing, but I think this has sort of been like reworked into the upper section to make more sense, if that's kind of works for you all. So I'm gonna delete this, but it's not like gone forever. We do have the copy that Jeff submitted. And then, yeah, so kind of going into this, I thought maybe okay, so we've got the section on benefits and harms, which I think, I sent to Ben already for his section on benefits and harms. So we're trying to kind of keep it high level and make sure it's upfront and not repetitive. I think I have this on sort of a cutting room floor document, but I can also just, save this and make sure we have it. But again, I think some of this is, specifically about manufactured homes, which I think should be in there, or just kind of at the top level about, issues where it'll be really difficult for some people to transition. So does that sound okay if we kind of cut this and I think I already sent it to Ben for his section, but so it's this potential harms, but again, I think it either belongs in the section related to that or yeah, so if we're comfortable deleting sort of that section. Does that sound good? Okay.
So all of like the potential harm sections in each of our demographic or sections will go into Ben's.
I think some of it we can specifically talk about. Like, I think what's been happening based on our renter section is it's been kind of collapsed into challenges where I think we had sort of like when we did the renter section, we mostly talked about existing challenges, but we're like, well, that's still a problem under a clean heat standard, like that kind of thing. So I think it makes sense to sort of collapse the challenges or benefits specifically related to that program in the sort of challenges section, even though that's messy, rather than being like mention like LIHEAP like 6 times in here. You know what I mean? Like I think it makes sense to sort of collapse it into a section, but I think we'll have to read the final document and make sure that costs and benefits section isn't missing stuff that we've kind of shuffled around. So I'm willing to say that might not work, but just in the interest of having this not be super long and super repetitive. So yeah, I think that section is going to be really important though. So I'm gonna go through and sort of just cut this out. And this LIHEAP section and is just up there in the LIHEAP section. Like it's just been taken as a piece of text and it's been put under challenges basically. So I'm gonna delete that. And then I thought and then the recommendations has been like pretty much untouched, but there's some sort of comments from Jeff. So I was thinking I would kind of stick this back into the draft, because these are all the citations, and we'll put this as the recommendation section. And so, I think with that's a reasonable sort of at least things are in the place that they should be. Does that sound right to you all?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a weird way to kind of try to make this work.
Are you working off of what you added, Mia?
So most of this is Jeff's thing.
Okay.
I basically went through and added, and so this is the body is Jeff's report. I stuck in the sections that I had worked on, which are mostly like agenda setting and overview and in the challenges section. And then I sort of pasted in Jeff's lightly edited version, and then I deleted the section about harms and benefits, and we'll get that into the section that we think it belongs to, or mentioning it specifically in like the LIHEAP section or the WAP section, which I think there is a discussion about harms and benefits in there.
So I see, sorry, I have one more clarifying question. So I see like the challenges section underneath the overview, and then it goes into energy burdens. And then we have like a LIHEAP section.
Yes.
And so we just deleted and moved like the potential harm section, which was separate from that.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we will talk about LIHEAP harms specifically. My vision, which again I don't know if it'll be successful, is in the overview of the report, we will touch on the high level harms, which, I think like costs, difficulty of people, being able to transition. And then like in the renter section, we talked about how the split incentive makes that really difficult. And like in the manufactured home section, we're going to talk about like that has some really specific technical challenges, things like that. So I think we'll just have to make sort of a decision as we edit the final report about what parts it makes sense to sort of host in the section and what parts it makes sense to keep.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Got it. This makes
yeah.
sense to me then. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, thank you for checking. I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
like heavy handed with the editing, just trying to keep
No.
everything in a way that makes some narrative sense.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure I understood where things are going. And I think like I just wrote the moderate income households section, and this format works with that better than what we just had with the harms included. So
yeah, I think
this
so.
looks
I mean, I
great.
think it was good that to retain those sections. So I think if you do have like content that seems specifically sort of related to harms that is not directly relevant to moderate income households, I think maybe send that along to Ben as just a placeholder that he can adopt if he kind of feels like there's a place for it. But yeah, and there's certainly stuff. Yeah, like I think the technical harms in manufactured homes definitely needs to have a thing. And this discussion of LIHEAP is a harms discussion as well as just a challenges thing. So
it's really keeping like super specific harms, like you're talking about, like the manufactured homes, some of the technology barriers and stuff. They're keeping those within that section, for example, and then some of the more uh, harms that kind of are cross-cutting, across all groups would be in the section that I'm writing.
yeah, I
Okay.
think that's the goal. And I think we're just going to have to look at the sort of final copy when everyone gets their sections and be like, oh, are we really missing something? Do we have to emphasize something more or move stuff around? Like it's going to be sort of a judgment call, I think. But as long as we get it in there. And I do think having harms at a high level is going to be helpful because you know that the farther you go into a report, the less likely people are to actually consume its content. So, yeah.
True.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just trying to think about the way we can spend our time today. I mean, the LIHEAP sections and the weatherization assistance program sections have good content. It's definitely like a lot in there that's kind of jumbled and I think needs it at a minimum some paragraphs. And then, I do think this group has been best when we've talked about recommendations because that's a little bit harder to sort of do on our own. So I guess what do you all think? Is it LIHEAP and weatherization challenges, or is it recommendations that we should start with?
I think I'd like to start with recommendations just because
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like we've talked quite a bit about some of the challenges. But the recommendations, I'm feeling like we need to, hammer those out.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good. Oops. These headers have gotten pretty weird. I'll have to figure out how to do that. Okay. That's a problem for doing the final report, but all the formatting is totally different. So it's going to have to just go in one final document. But that's fine. Okay. So let's just start going down the list of recommendations and seeing where we land on some of this. So the first one is low income and fuel type exemptions, which again, I just kind of a preface. I think our intern just took these out of the conversation as they were said and didn't, give any particular weight to any suggestion. I mean, I think a low income exemption would be extremely difficult to do in practice, on the delivered fuel side. And just figuring out who is low income. There'd certainly be, I think, more incentives to falsely attest to income versus, for credit purposes, which is kind of more nebulous. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I just don't see it working in practice. Like even if it is a more equitable thing to do, you know, we could have some sort of, I mean, I think the problem is like on the electrical side, what's been done is, you have to affirmatively sign up, and like OEO will give you, will help you get a discount if you're a VGS or GMP customer. So, I mean, that's one way you could do it, but it requires a level of like organization that we don't see in our fuel dealership, our fuel dealers sort of network. And on the electrical side, it's voluntary. Like no one, you get a discount, not a, as you sign up for a discount, you don't get a different rate in the same way that I think this is suggesting. So I guess, I mean, Emily, Ben, let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think a low income exemption is like practically workable. I don't know if we suggest that someone comes up with a discount program, like, or I mean, that's kind of what LIHEAP is, but in a more roundabout way.
Right. Yeah, I also think that, saying low-income Vermonters are exempt, I mean, then we basically also, on the flip side of that, is saying that they would be potentially receive less of the benefits of the program. I mean, we're talking a lot about the harms, but I think like if you were to say exempt them, then you'd basically, any benefits that do come from the Clean Heat Standard in terms of, actual implemented measures from the obligated parties would not be going to them because they wouldn't have to serve them. You know what I mean? So I think an exemption, I know what, I get what Matt's getting at there. I think instead of a low income exemption, I think, if we were to keep that, I think it would be more valuable as a targeted exemption at looking at the potentially the fuel type, like he references there, or just saying specifically manufactured, like residents of manufactured homes.
I guess I just don't. I mean, the costs are so nebulous. Unless a fuel dealer's only business is in manufactured home communities or for manufactured homes, which doesn't seem likely. Like, there's nothing to stop them from assessing their prices more broadly. Like, they're not really going to, or even necessarily going to be able to, like keep their prices segmented out to a specific part of the market. So I guess even like the whole low income exemption, like I don't know what that means, because if a fuel dealer is seeing like fewer importer, sorry, like an obligated party, is seeing less net profit, they're going to make it up somehow. And like as a, you can't stop people from raising prices under the clean heat standard. Like there's no practical way to do that. So you'd have to give a targeted discount, and so
Which
I don't
could
know.
be difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know
Yeah.
if we say, oh, go on, Emily. Yeah.
No, I was just saying I agree with everything you've showed on this.
I mean, I don't know if that's like, we can put a placeholder here as we think about other suggestions, but like maybe just expanding LIHEAP, or deepening LIHEAP.
Yeah.
Gonna put that in, and we can definitely get back to that, but
Right. Because what you just described really is if field dealers are, having basically a blanket increase, let's say, they have to raise the price of their delivered fuel, that could, you could, if you exempt the low income folks, you could end up having a situation where they end up paying the increased costs and again are not part of the program. So like they're both paying the increased costs and not getting, potentially seeing any of the benefit from the program. So it's like a double-edged, there's double whammy kind of, it's both things are. I just don't know if we want to suggest any kind of exemption at all in this fashion. I think what I know Matt's talked about having instead of an exemption, another recommendation would be allowing an eligible measure to be switching, for example, from kerosene to propane in a mobile home situation, for example, because then they would, while propane costs more, a dollar per MMBTU, you are able to have a situation where you have a more efficient heating system with propane than with kerosene. You can also weatherize manufactured or like mobile homes. You can make them tighter in terms of like their air leakage. You can, with a direct vent propane system, you can get them super tight So you can maximize the benefit from weatherization and still have a appliance that still drafts properly and if you have kerosene, it'll backdraft and create a safety problem for that home. So I don't know.
Just a question. I should know this by now, but I thought kerosene was more expensive than propane. But Jeff was saying in the document that propane is the most expensive. Did I see that?
Yeah, per unit. Yeah, because basically when you look at the energy density of the fuel,
Mhm.
versus cost, you get less MMBTU per dollar spent on propane. Kerosene is probably right up there. I mean, it really depends on the year, I suppose, with kerosene. It also depends on if it is actual kerosene that is mixed like at the refinery, or if it's number two diesel fuel that, a supplier has added, stabilizer, like, basically to the batch that they're delivering. That I think you can reduce costs that way. So yeah, it's a little nuanced with kerosene, but generally propane is fairly expensive, but you're able to have more efficient systems that burn it. So
Oh, is that why? Because I know, like, generally more modern homes, it's like natural gas, in territory, and then it's, kerosene or propane, you know,
right.
kerosene and fuel oil in terms of like more modern homes and it's just only what we've seen in the housing stock. But okay, so it's like a combination of how efficient your equipment can be and how much the cost is. Okay, yeah, okay. So it's a bit of
Yeah,
nuanced discussion.
propane ends up making sense because because the equipment that utilizes it is more efficient.
I see. Okay. No, that helps. I couldn't, and we should probably, I think we've got references all over the place in here about like which is more expensive. And I think sometimes it's just to illustrate a point, like low income households are more likely to use this, but we should, and maybe either Jeff or Ben can tighten up the references because I think we're kind of all over the place about that. So if that matters. Yeah, and I mean, I think on Matt's point about the kerosene exemption from the obligated fuels list, or fuel switching, like I guess like I see this sort of utilitarian approach where like if you could save, reduce emissions by fuel switching, like that could net positive, even though it's not as like full transition as we'd like. I don't think that's what we've been presented with the clean heat standard. Like it's always hard for us to know as an advisory group, like are we just recommending that they do something that's like not what's in Act 18 and not like in the spirit of Act 18 and like something like because we've said like, oh, you could tweak this definition and be more specific or something. I just don't know how you get this like it seems like it would, I mean, and I'm like can speak to this about the tag, but it seems like how to account for like fuel switching between fossil fuels would just completely throw off the calculations for like what you were doing under the Global Warming Solutions Act.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't know how you credit that. So yeah, I guess I would feel more comfortable with suggesting an exemption for kerosene, which we know is about, according to Weatherization Assistance Program data, it's about 50% of the mobile homes that they serve burn kerosene. So really, we're talking about a fairly small population. I think it's like 6% of all fuel sales is kerosene. It is, quite an expensive, price volatile fuel. So if you were to exempt that, you'd basically be targeting, it would be essentially a targeted exemption at, this very specific segment of the population that, by all metrics is the most energy burdened in the state. So from that point of view, exempting that population from any obligation, or any price increase in fuel could be effective, I suppose.
Is there any obligated parties who deal in multiple fuel types?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay, that would make sense. So targeted exemption doesn't necessarily mean a targeted like price stabilization. You know what I mean? Like just because you don't have to make up the credits related to your share of kerosene doesn't mean you're obligated to give those customers any discount. I think that's the problem with these recommendations. You can't make someone give them a discount unless they like register through a program like VGS and GMP have sort of elected to do. There's not like a great way to make somebody steer their prices around. So I think that's the problem. Unless kerosene suppliers are only supplying kerosene,
It's a really good point. And so something you just said there, it's like maybe the recommendation that we have is kind of what you just described, given that we are, the obligated entities, fuel dealers will be newly regulated entities under the Clean Heat Standard. Wouldn't it make sense to have a mechanism by which, that exists in the electric sector and in, with natural gas currently, is that there basically is like low income rates, right? So couldn't we suggest something similar, is that like to provide relief for low income energy burden households that we're trying to target, have basically a mechanism by which they can apply for essentially a low income fuel rate, essentially outside of LIHEAP, which, because LIHEAP just straight up gives you free fuel. This would be anything above what LIHEAP delivers could be delivered at a discounted rate. As I'm saying this out loud, I'm not sure if that exists already. I mean, I know there's crisis fuel and there's a LIHEAP. Crisis fuels is what it is. It's people like run out of fuel and they need something right away in a crisis situation. But yeah, LIHEAP is more planned. So what do you guys think about that? I mean, what if we, I don't know the exact mechanics of how that might work. It could get complicated, but I think you'd be safe to say if someone qualifies for LIHEAP, they're on a list. The fuel dealers know which customers that they have that are on that LIHEAP list, and then they could just basically use that list to, deem customers eligible for any discounted, or price protection, basically, for lack of a better term. So they didn't see any increase in fuel costs. Like, I don't know how. It would have to be subsidized by other ratepayers, though.
I think that's the problem, and they don't have ratepayers in the exact same way we do. And I don't think that'd be popular. Like we've kind of socialized that cost with something big enough like GMP and
Right.
VGS, where like you don't really, I mean, I don't know if you flippant, but like it's not an amount that you tend to feel acutely on your natural gas or electrical bill. Like it's I forget the dollar amount, but it's not a huge charge. I'm sure some people it's still an additional challenge, but so yeah, I think you get a pretty widespread variance in terms of like if you're a small enough producer, you couldn't fund that with a demand charge very easily. I think you would. I mean, it gets a little bit back to the commission's alternate proposal to do I always forget what they're called, but like
energy benefit charge.
Yeah, so you could do that kind of thing, but you would have to have someone sort of redistribute it. And and again, is the question, are you redistributing it for sort of transitional purposes like weatherization or heat pumps, or are you doing it for just a pure benefit like LIHEAP? And I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion, saying like if there's a way to get money from something, TBD, the Clean Heat Standard or this, like maybe we do need to think of fuel assistance and not just assistance in transitioning. But that also gets back into, under a Clean Heat Standard, you do need to raise the money to do the things. So I don't know. I think the funding is a real problem for this proposal. You know what I mean?
So I wonder. Yeah, go ahead, Emily. Sorry.
Nope, it's okay. I just wanted to say, I think that in this next section, it's not just like weatherization or electrification, it's like heating assistance as well. And then, yeah, just aligning with the moderate income section, that was like a main recommendation I had, was expanding existing programs that are already doing work in the state, whether that's expanding funding for a program or the program itself to do more things. So I wonder if what we're talking about can be captured in this expansion And there's some language in here that I'd want to change or recommend changing, but yeah.
Talking about
No, I
expanding basically the heating assistance funding, essentially. Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say after
Yeah.
we kind of like just talked about it just now. I think that's ultimately what we're basically getting at. Yeah, is, you know, we have existing policies in place. I guess probably the easiest mechanism would be to just expand existing policies that do provide, you know, guaranteed and savings for low income folks, and you know, we know they work. So
Mhm.
um, it's probably what we should go with. I'm thinking.
Yep. I'm thinking that too.
I think they should maybe just be two separate things, just because I think there's maybe a different discussion about how you do some of that. I mean, we can collapse those if they want, but I think they might be they're different programs.
I wonder if they can be under like one recommendation that is like what I had in the moderate income section, which is like all under expanding existing programs, which encapsulates expansion of programs and then increasing of funding for these
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, I just think making that point clear and then going into the different types of programs might be
Sure. Yeah, we can do.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. Because ultimately, it's kind of like one of those painful realities that it's like if we do want to move forward with a clean heat standard, you know, if the legislature decides to move it forward, I think basically the reality is there's going to need to be a whole tranche of funding to increase all these programs. Because I think really, short of creating like new complexity in what's already existing, it's basically just expanding what's already there, more funding to, you know, reduce the impact to low income folks. That's probably the main through line is what we're getting at, is
yeah,
what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I agree with that, Ben.
Yeah. So yeah, if you already wrote the moderate income, because that was, I was thinking that as well. You know, as I go through the you know, the benefits and recommendation section, that was going to be one of the recommendations. So was to expand existing programs to bring in folks in the moderate income category. So I'm glad you already wrote that, because that was going to be one of the recommendations that I suggested.
And
So
along that lines, right after in my moderate income section, I have like the expansion of existing programs to do this work. And then I note that like increased funding and expansion of the programs probably won't happen with limited workforce. And so I think that workforce needs to be, if we're recommending expansion of programs, we need to recommend funding and implementation of workforce and market transformation activities that's related to that. Because I think we can't recommend expanding fundings if there's no one to expand
yep.
the programs.
Yeah, I think that's on point. Yep.
And especially true for low income.
Yeah. I wonder, I feel like this is kind of risky to throw out just because I haven't really thought about it, but like I know a lot of the sort of state resources for you know, just efficiency, you know, and other, you know, like electrification and weatherization are sort of targeted the low and moderate income sector, but not all of them. Like there are high income benefits, and I don't know if anyone's thought about if that should be revisited. I mean, you don't want people to stop doing it at the high income level, but is it, you know, is there tinkering with that? Again, I don't want to like upend Efficiency Vermont's business. I'm just thinking about like, has anyone looked at how that's being kind of addressed today?
I did
kind of what I
you go first,
sorry.
Ben. Nope,
I was going to say just briefly, that's kind of what I was thinking with the alternate proposal from the PUC is sort of what they're getting at, is that thermal energy benefit charge is basically reworking the energy efficiency charge to somehow, you know, shift funding to the thermal energy realm. That was my initial takeaway from that, but yeah, I don't know if that's what you're going to say, Emily, or.
I was just going to say, this is kind of sort of related. I did touch on market rate in the moderate income section. So those that are above moderate income and still receive some sort of incentive, but don't fit the low income or moderate income definition. for either the low income agency work or Efficiency Vermont or other EU incentives. So yeah, I didn't really have much to say other than I acknowledged the existence of market rate weatherization.
Right. Because right now, so Efficiency Vermont has like the home performance of the Energy Star, which I know is available to, anybody, like market rate folks. That would be, so that's, yeah, part of the suite of services, and it's basically just a discount on weatherization, right? That's passed through to the customer.
Yeah, if you give me 1 second, I have in my many tabs open a spreadsheet of like the different
Offerings.
income requirement offerings. So I
Yep.
can clarify that in just 1 second.
Cool.
Yeah, I know it is like everyone gets a benefit for home performance, but you get more if you're lower income, and free for WAP. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know that we've studied enough to say that we should completely upend the system. And there's the whole like, I mean, I think that's the part I find challenging. Like, are these social assistance programs, or are they like carbon saving, emissions reducing programs? And those things don't always go well together. You know what I mean? In terms of like, what are you trying to achieve with these programs? Like, you could have both, but you might have less of both, or some, like some version of that. So I don't know.
And I mean, to be clear too, I think, for example, the Weatherization Assistance Program is first and foremost a anti-poverty program with that also has carbon benefits to it. So I think we definitely, I don't think we should, and I know the department does not support any position that, we have the position around the weatherization program where, yes, there could be some efficiencies to be found in terms of, or GHG reductions to be found within the weatherization program, but we don't want to, do no harm to the most vulnerable. So I think, because if you were to start tinkering some of the rules of weatherization, you could get into a situation where you're after GHG reduction, but having less benefit to the client, which is, the primary goal. So yeah, so if, want to be careful that we don't, and also, shifting money from like an energy efficiency charge, which is on, electric ratepayers, shifting that to pay for thermal sector emissions reductions is not also something that the department doesn't really support. I don't think the EAG should just support either, because there's equity considerations there. The cross subsidization between sectors, I don't know if we want to wade into those waters, because it does get pretty complicated pretty quickly. Yeah, and just like a little.
No, I think that's fair, and I think everyone on the EAG, or most people on the EAG, would agree that like we don't want to see like greater savings targets at the expense of low income houses. I think you just get really weird incentives, and I mean like economic incentives from these sort of collisions of cost efficiency and like social economic benefits for households in a way that's like really hard to sort of tinker with parts of it without making other parts of it worse. It's like a weird. I don't know, like just some of the stuff we've been discussing, we're like, oh, well, what about that thing? It's not straightforward.
Exactly.
So, Emily, do you want to show us something?
Just to clarify, the two home performance with Energy Star, there's a market rate program that basically it looks like doesn't have income eligibility, and then the PIP with home performance with Energy Star, low and moderate income, has eligibility requirements of customers at or below 120% AMI, and that just has increased funding. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I think nodding to that in the moderate income section, but it doesn't maybe sound like are prepared to say that the whole system as it stands should be like radically overhauled without kind of researching that more, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what you would do. And it does, I think if you did scrap all higher income incentives, you'd probably have some significant rethinking to do about Global Warming Solutions Act, targets and things like that. So I don't know. I didn't get other bad consequences. I just kind of wanted to think about what we're asking for here.
I mean, are we talking about, I think we're sort of skirting the issue, but basically the expansion of the weatherization assistance program to serve moderate income populations. That's what we're referring to here. See, because I don't know if that would affect like the energy efficiency charge, revenue, because that's electric ratepayers. So that would be different. What we'd be talking about is basically an expansion of the existing, WAP program with basically because the Department of Energy dollars that OEO uses they would not be eligible to serve anybody above the 80% AMI because that would need a federal rules change. But state funding, from the HWAP budget, which is the state, weatherization trust fund, that budget the money from there would be able to be used for moderate income folks if there was like a change in the statute for that fund. Basically, gross receipts tax money getting funneled into that, and then so I mean that would be viable. I mean that would be, I think, a pretty legitimate recommendation that we could make. I think it is, on the face of it, is pretty radical, and it's saying something. That's like that'd be pretty significant. However, we do know there's an affordability crisis in Vermont, and we know that moderate income Vermonters are struggling. I mean, also to be clear, though, I would have to talk with some colleagues at the department to see if that is something that we would want to support through, via the EAG. I think because it's a little controversial. Obviously that'd be
Yeah, and I was thinking on a more macro level about like where the state's money towards efficiency goes. I think a lot of it is tier 3, which as far as I know doesn't have any sort of low and moderate income strings. You could do something saying like all the tier 3 money or all the other things like ARPA or whatever that the state has sort of directed towards energy policy more narrowly serve low and moderate income households. I think that could cause some consequences that we haven't thought through. But that's what I was thinking in terms of like, where is the state spending money on efficiency, and like where is it not targeted at low and moderate income households? But again, I don't really know what happens when you do that. I don't want to be sorry, go on, Emily.
I would just say before we continue on this discussion, I would really want Jeff to have a say. I think that I'm not sure if Jeff would be on board with this recommendation, and I recommend against it. And I can share more in the full EAG meeting, but I think that knowing the workforce constraints and the high number of folks that are in need and trying to go through the low income program, there's really different benefits and needs for both, I think, a market rate, moderate income offers that Efficiency Vermont provides versus the low income. And I think there's benefits to both. And I don't really see a benefit of, I would say, I guess what Efficiency Vermont has been advocating for really strongly, consistently through this process is to support existing programs and to eliminate overlap and potential customer confusion. And I think that if we're thinking about expanding a program to do what another program already has experience and is set up to do, including working on market transformation activities and workforce expansion, I think that just opens the door for creating basically a new program that does both, that's not efficient if there's already existing programs that are doing that work. So that's my recommendation in my spiel. But
no, that's fine. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's good to highlight. I don't want to be like capricious and suggesting stuff. I think it's more for me. I'm just like, I don't know that we have our arms around like which sources of money are, feeding which income levels, and how you could sort of reimagine that without kind of blowing everything up or creating new programs that do existing programs. So I don't know. That's fine. I think when discussing some of this stuff, we've gotten into like, well, what should these programs do? And like, how should they be funded that is core to our mission, but takes us into some like deep places pretty fast. So yeah.
Also, I think everything you just said, Emily, is on point and well informed, and I would agree with you. I was just sort of throwing it out there for conversation purposes, because it would be a major disruption to the marketplace as it exists now to do that, and I think what you just said makes a whole lot of sense. So, also when talking about like new sources of fun, like this does get into like a little bit of territory, like what's some of the stuff being discussed in the Climate Council, and like I'm on the thermal buildings and thermal task group, and like so that's sort of like the realm for like thinking about new sources of revenue and like what to do with existing programs, etc. I don't know if the EAG necessarily needs to go there. Like I wonder if we just sort of simplify all this and say, hey, we just need more funding for to protect the most vulnerable in our society, because that's pretty much what we're getting at, right? I mean, I think it does make sense for us to do some saying increase program funding for weatherization. That makes total sense. And just like being somewhat targeted about where we're suggesting new funding goes to, but yeah, I don't know if we need to get super specific is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I agree with that, Ben. And I think that just to add on, like, I think future discussions with the full EAG about additional funding going towards new programs would definitely be beneficial. But also, I think it sounds like, I think based on what Ben just said and what I shared earlier, that supporting existing programs with increased funding and opportunities, and also looking at the workforce constraints that are constraining the current programs and numbers. Like those are the two things constraining numbers currently, is funding and workforce. So being able to have opportunity from that inside the clean heat standard seems like our main focus and point.
Like really, it's almost like you got to fund the workforce part of it first. Because to increase programmatic funding that's great, but if there's no one there to do it, it doesn't matter. So,
and I think I'm just adding a note, like reliable and consistent resources, I think will be helpful for households, but also to keep these programs, like WAP has a pretty, from what I understand, the sort of funding roller coaster has not helped their ability to, attract and retain people if they can't expect that it's going to be long-term. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we should recenter. I'm thinking we take public comment and then we take a more like targeted approach to getting some of these recommendations, and honestly just being willing to strike out stuff that we don't think is viable at this stage, and we can talk to the full EAG about why we sort of did or didn't think some stuff was potentially feasible. Okay, so I am going to open the floor for public comment. I see there's 3 non-EAG members. If you're able to put your digital hand up to speak, that would be great. If not, you can just be unmuted and we'll work it out. Anyone want to do public comment?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm John McCormick.
Hey, John.
I want to begin by saying that I do respect the diligence that you've all applied to this near hopeless task of coming up with an affordable clean heat standard. Given the results yesterday, I think you can all agree that perhaps what comes to the legislature is dead on arrival. It is time, it really is time, it's come to Jesus time, frankly, to go back to that October 1 comment that PUC made, that it's looking for an alternative. And the alternative is use what we've got. Weatherization Assistance Program and its agencies and the other EEUs. Now, Stephen Heffernan is intent on introducing a Weatherization Assistance Program reauthorization. He wants to increase the salaries of the workers by $10 over several years. He wants to authorize Weatherization Assistance Program to provide no-cost weatherization and retrofits to the lower median income stratum. It's going to require a lot more workforce nonetheless. But if you're increasing the salary by $10 and perhaps even more, but certainly increasing it over time, you're going to attract more workers. Jeff Wilcox has already said this and is a part of a national effort to promote the Weatherization Assistance Program funded by DOE and the states, and increasing salaries was the #1 target to improve the condition of workforce shortage. So you've got the PUC now looking for an alternative, and it has to be written by EAG, not TAG, but EAG, because you are going through a pretty remarkable discussion about the impacts on low-income families and LIHEAP constituents, etc. We're going to pursue this. There will be a piece of legislation that will be introduced, and I hope that, Ben, you would work with us, because I think what you're saying is, yes, there is some validity in this, but I have drafted that bill that Steve Heffernan is going to introduce. I believe it could benefit from conversations with Dave Westman and Peter Walk to work out the language that would also make the trust funds available to VEIC. If anyone has a comment on that, I'm not going to leave this issue. It's going to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, John. First, I would say we are kind of in this equity advisory group process. So I do think if you have sort of parallel programs, I'd encourage you to reach out to Peter Walk or other people directly about their participation, rather than the sort of members of the group who are appearing as EAG members here. I think you're right to sort of look ahead to see what's going to be possible in the session, but as an equity advisory group, we've been told by the legislature in the last section that we are going to do this report on the clean heat standard. And, we have, I'd say about a month left to sort of complete our report and get it approved. So we are going to still work on that. I am sort of in reviewing the work that we're doing at this meeting, seeing, when we talk about increasing program funding for WAP, I do think that, salary considerations are something we could flag. I think that totally makes sense. And I'm certainly hopeful that the legislature, no matter what program they pursue, will think about the things that we flagged and the feedback we've heard from Vermonters and experts, and sort of incorporate that into programs. But we are kind of bound to look at what's in front of us for the purposes of what we're required to do under Act 18. So definitely hear you, but that's kind of how I think we're going to move forward until we sort of get a specific directive to look at something else. But I definitely hear your concerns, and we'll have to see what happens in the session about the future of this one. Ben, Emily, anything to add?
I was just going to say, I think you just touched upon it. Thank you for those comments, John. I would support including in our recommendations, if we are talking about increasing funding for weatherization, that we do include something on increasing worker salary, because it does, we don't need to be super specific about that recommendation, but just I think opining on it would be good to kind of, because it does touch upon the workforce problem and the actual weatherization, that increased funding to weatherization does need to be, or potentially should be, funneled towards worker salary recruitment. Because I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's what is needed. So yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Alex, I think you'll unmute if you want to say anything, but otherwise I'll just carry on. Okay, so let's try to get more targeted in what we're doing. So I'm highlighting this section on low income and fuel type exemptions, and I'm going to say, just based on what we've heard, but correct me if I'm wrong, we just don't think that's actionable, like at this point with the technical challenges. Okay, so I'm just gonna put, yeah, let's look this here. Okay, so let's just go through the list and see where sort of stuff shows up on here. So I think the mobile homes, I think I already sent this to Chris for his section, but actually I think this is, okay, I don't know about this because that seems to be maybe talking about something else. I don't know if it's about mobile homes, but okay, so there's this section about mobile homes that I think I have sent to Chris for his section, but I will make sure I did do that. I guess in the manufactured homes thing, we could take up this kerosene to propane thing again, but I don't know, we kind of nixed it in the other one. Okay, I mean, I don't want to say it's a terrible idea. I just don't know how you do it from a practical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, what you just said, basically. I don't know how that would be kind of an awkward recommendation from us, I guess, to say, allowing folks to switch from kerosene to another fossil fuel, which is price volatile. You're effectively, the whole point is to, while that would make it easier for obligated parties to serve folks in mobile homes, I don't know if you'd actually be benefiting the client would not see a long-term benefit, or the folks living in the mobile home, besides the fact they have a potentially more cost-effective fuel over time.
I was
I
just
wonder
gonna
if, oh,
say,
Emily.
sorry, Mia. I was just gonna say, I wonder, I don't know if this is already done, but I wonder if that's just a place where in the manufactured homes document, we can just flag the high use of kerosene.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's already
debated
done,
that
but
point. I don't know if
Mhm.
I'll probably end up. Well, we're all going to end up reading it, but I think, yeah, that's probably where it belongs. Is just a discussion of the heating. If it's not in there, it needs to be. I think Jeff Wilcox is reviewing that section, so he probably will say this, but
yeah,
there needs to be a discussion about what types of heating systems are used in mobile homes
yeah.
from a technical aspect, because it does matter, and there's repercussions for what we're talking about here. So yeah, probably. I don't think we need it here, basically.
I think I did send it to him too, like just the way you did with your sections. If it was relevant, I kind of like excised that from the section and sent it along to the person if I saw it. Okay, I don't know about this part about the PUC should not restrict fuel assistance dollars to electric heating, because I don't think that is a thing.
You can get LIHEAP for
Right.
electricity. Yeah.
And that's not even through the PUC. So I don't know if Matt was talking about like some future type of program, but
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I don't,
Sure.
it might have been out of context. I mean, we're playing telephone a little bit with transcribed notes and our intern doing her best to figure out what that person meant. So I'm going to assume that that's something else.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So doing it.
Okay, so what do we've got? Ensure that measures taken to decarbonize do not drive up heating costs. Again, I don't know that the PUC does control. I mean, LIHEAP is not really in their jurisdiction. I just don't know that they're going to be prescriptive in that way, Like
Right.
obligated parties can just, as long as they follow the rules about how many credits they need, they can do that however they want, basically. So I just don't know. I just don't see the PUC doing this.
You're talking about the first. I guess I'll highlight it so you guys can see.
Yeah, I'm
Talking
highlighting
about
it. So
this.
no, I was talking about well, that part too, but especially the PUC should prioritize customer economics, ensuring that measures taken to decarbonize don't drive up heating costs. Like I believe that's possible. Like improperly installing a heat pump could increase costs for sure, but I don't know that like the PUC is doing that. I mean, maybe that's something to flag in your section, Ben, about just like we think that there's some consumer risks in this marketplace that could be increased, but I just don't know that it's like, I just don't know that the PUC has any say over like if I buy a heat pump as a consumer and the installer does a lousy job, like I think you have the opportunity to basically sue, and then maybe someone offering a rebate or something has some obligation to keep an eye on that contractor and make sure that they're not having access to the rebate stream or something. But I just don't know that the PUC has much ability to police whether people are making smart choices as consumers or as, you know, good actions as customers. So I just don't see that in their purview under the clean heat standard to tell like what measures are correct and which aren't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what he's probably getting at here, the way I interpret that, is just basically building in protections for low-income households. I think we might have already touched upon this when we said, you know, we've sort of had this broader discussion. I don't know. I guess I don't know where it ended up in this report. Is basically, yeah, ensuring that the obligated parties basically aren't taking advantage of their customers to like just, you know, going to somebody who they know like a heat pump's not going to work at their house, but they sell it to them anyway, kind of thing. I think that's sort of what he's getting at here, is trying to, you know, mitigate anything like that, disingenuous stuff going on for low-income households. But yeah, the PUC, I don't know. I guess isn't that, I don't know if that would be covered under the clean heat standard. That would be covered under like the Consumer Protection Act, probably. For
The
like,
way
Yeah,
that
those are going, Emily. Yeah.
the way that I address this in the moderate income section is it's like a part of the recommendation to expand existing programs in the way that existing programs are set up to ensure quality control and safety aspects. And so like I'm not as familiar with the low income programs and their steps, and Ben, you may be, but like what I have from Efficiency Vermont is the EEN network and yeah, all these steps to make sure you're using contractors and doing projects that make sense for your home will be used correctly. That's like another thing that I see really important for low income households. And I think that if that's what this is trying to say, is like quality assurance and safety assurance and protecting low income customers, I think that maybe we can add that. That would be my recommendation, is to add that to the expansion of existing programs as they already have systems set up to protect both quality, safety, and use of equipment or fuel switching or existing equipment.
yeah, the quality control, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely built into the low-income weatherization. And I think you're correct. Yeah, basically the same thing for moderate is with that energy efficiency network, folks.
So
Yep.
maybe the DDA plays a role in doing, because I just don't think it's the PUC directly. Like they are just not like on the ground in a way that would help them. Like I mean, it's either I think maybe the Department of Public Service or the Attorney General's office if someone is specifically doing fraud stuff. I just don't know that it is fundamentally fraud to like or like legally actionable to not weatherize a home before putting in a heat pump. Like you totally should. It's not necessarily a crime. I guess I don't know that you like ethically should get clean heat credits from it, but the system is not really designed for that, and just coming up with a reasonable enforcement mechanism. So we could say that the DDA will play a special role in, you know, or even that the DDA could be charged with ensuring that the credits are ethically sourced, for lack of a better word. I don't know what we would ask about that, but maybe just that the DDA has a responsibility to, especially for low income customers, keep an eye on what's happening in the market.
Yeah, I think you could reasonably say that if you're going to be the DDA, you should have basically a quality control in place, and maybe that could include like random sampling of the jobs that have been done to ensure that they're like basically the maybe not won't have to go as far as like on-site verification, but you know, just at least a desk review verification of measures. How do you feel about that, Emily? I mean, you guys probably already do that, like
I was going to say that that definitely overlaps. I think that's where I was recommending the importance of like the existing programs, because they typically already do this work. They do the work to ensure customer isn't doing two programs at once that are overlapping. A lot of existing programs are constantly in touch with each other and communicating, and oftentimes get customers that they send to another program that may be better for them. And so I think that this work like is currently already being done. And so I think we should definitely flag that that's how this is functioning presently. And then I'm not really sure on like a DDA. I'm not sure if I don't think I have a say if I agree or disagree if this should be a DDA function or not, thinking about if a DDA is an administrative functioning entity for the clean heat standard. I think that that could definitely fall under that as a part of it, but I also like want to acknowledge, yeah, going back to my main point that this work I think is already being done with a lot of the weatherization and heating assistance and yeah, existing programs serving low
And
income
actually, now that you
customers.
say that, it's like, well, the department already does that too. So
Mhm.
like we're going to be charged with verifying all the measures. So I guess, yeah, we're already doing that. It's already built in.
And maybe this doesn't go in the low income section because I mean it's not a one-to-one, but the WAP is generally the low income programs, and I don't think we have reason to believe that they are like not doing this. So I think it mostly becomes maybe a like when we talk about the oversight, you know, we need to maybe the PUC reviews the systems who are the people who are delivering the measures, like especially the DDA, and just make sure that there's some reason to believe that measures are sort of being, you know, that the marketplace is functioning and that there's, you know, fairness and best practices. I don't know that we'll have a specific recommendation, but again, I don't think like Efficiency Vermont and the WAP, which are our primary sort of delivery systems now, are like not doing those things. I think the biggest risk would be maybe, and I don't think it's likely, you had a new entity somehow doing DDA work who wasn't sort of sourcing credits responsibly. But again, I don't know that that's going to happen. That seems
But
like a
the
stretch.
PUC they'll be checking it, right? The PUC. And the weathers, I used to do quality control inspections for the weatherization program, so I know that's definitely built in.
Yeah.
You have to have special certification and stuff. So
I think acknowledging, sorry, Ben, didn't mean to cut you
nope,
off.
that's fine.
I think that mentioning it, I guess like the way I did it and yeah, I think part of expanding programs, I think it's important in this recommendation section from my perspective to note the importance of existing programs doing this work. Because I think that relates to like a reason, supports the reasoning behind expanding existing programs and the work that they do.
No, I
So I
think
would
that's a good
recommend adding that. And it aligns with the moderate income recommendations as well.
I think that's
Basically
a good
just
way of
calling
putting
out
it.
that this is already happening. This is already a functioning, well-functioning program. And yeah, that's a good, basically call it out. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, it says funds that are currently directed towards heating costs should not be reallocated towards system upgrades. I just don't think we're seeing a proposal where anyone has proposed to do that. I mean, I think it's a potential future risk at some point, but you know, like I don't think anyone has suggested that now, or as part of the clean heat standard. Beyond, you know, we talked about I think further up that LIHEAP has some potential dangers of sort of becoming less funded under a clean heat standard, but so I'm just gonna get rid of this.
Agreed. Yep.
I think we cover this and we just deleted other stuff for this. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to be heavy-handed with this.
No, is that I mean, I think he's making a good point here. I don't know if it's really he's basically saying, I think what I sort of said a little bit ago is that weatherization assistance program is first and foremost, of anti-poverty, and that not to, move GHG reduction to the forefront over like helping folks get out of poverty, I think is sort of what he's saying. The priority still needs to be on, the anti-poverty side of things.
Maybe we should take this and put this at the overview section because it's kind of like a mission thing versus. So I'm gonna excise this and we'll see how we like it up here.
Yeah,
think
I think
that-
that's because it's a good thought. Maybe we
Yeah.
could refine the wording a little bit, but I do like what he's trying to say there is that we need to keep the focus on, he said, yeah, it's a balance, like he says right there. We need to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that we're first and foremost trying to protect low-income folks.
Okay. Putting it up there. So balancing the need to decarbonize home heating systems with the immediate need to provide heating support to those who cannot afford it. Okay. I think I think this paragraph can be sort of collapsed.
He
does say it is a challenge. I mean, I guess.
I think it's fine to keep it in the overview. I'm just trying to I think some of this let's see. I think it's still like repetitive, but not in a. I'm trying to think. The standard to reduce carbon emissions, low-income households, which often struggle with. I don't know that I'd say forced into temporary housing. We could say housing instability or something. I get what he's saying. I don't.
We don't
Temporary
really.
is specific, like you could, yeah,
I guess you could just say unstable. Yeah, I guess maybe forced into temporary.
I could say housing instability.
Yeah, is that like getting at? I get because it's true. He's
Okay.
basically saying folks won't be able to afford to stay where they like to. Yeah, to stay in their existing housing situation if costs increase. So
I just think temporary housing is specific. Like, you could move in with somebody because you couldn't afford your house, and I guess that could be temporary. It could be permanent. Like, I think it's housing instability versus moving into temporary housing. That just seems like a specific. I think he's talking about stuff like the motel program and stuff, but that's not the only way people respond to housing insecurity. Like, you could have to move out of a nicer apartment to a crowded and less healthy apartment. Like, there's different. Instability. So yeah, I think that's a good way to put heating support to those who cannot afford that. Okay, yeah, I like that. I'm glad we kept that. I think it does get to the sense of like what we were dealing with, and I think Jeff puts it well. But yeah, I think it's not really a recommendation per se. Going back down here. Okay. So where did we end off? So I do think this is I think it needs to be cleaned up again, but I know Jeff has been a little skeptical about this whole issue about, LIHEAP funding covering both sources. And I know like Dwight from CVOEO is really thinks it is an issue, and Jeff is kind of less certain. I don't think he's dismissed it outright. He's just not seeing it, I think, in his work is how he's described it. But I do think that there's something there for like if we do think that there's a benefit in getting people heat pumps, like there are some real bad sort of perverse incentives with LIHEAP for people not actually using them. And so I do think that is maybe something like eventually as more and more households use heat pumps, especially with the DOE rebates and things like that, you're gonna have this be an issue. And I also think actually maybe citing we don't currently have much in the way of, or any, I guess, benefits for cooling. And that's not really what LIHEAP is for, but I think someone in other states said that they do that. So I'm going to put a placeholder for saying like, also more support for cooling from LIHEAP, fuel and electric. And I think that would just have to be like work at like our delegation is going to have to work at the federal level or something, or the state needs to work at the federal level.
I think we definitely I really like how we have a little section on this because I think it is an emerging issue, and it's one that I know is being discussed at the task group I'm on at the Climate Council for the cross-sector subcommittee. It's like, yeah, it's something that I don't think has been really much beyond like kind of recognizing that it's an emerging issue, but it is being discussed. So I think it's it'd be good for us to include it here just to kind of flag it as we have done.
Okay, I think we might need a little bit more context to talk about what we want, but
yeah, I think you were on the call, Mia, the meeting with the CAP agencies when they had that client who talked about how he just has a brand new heat pump, but he's like, I get light heat for my oil boilers, so he's like, I just run that because it's free. Even though the heat
I
pump
guess if someone's doing it, yeah,
it's like, even though the heat pump is technically cheaper to run, it's like, well, he has to pay for that, but not the oil. So it's like, I mean, I get it, that makes perfect sense. It's like when you're worried about your budget, it's like you're gonna use whatever's, free. So
yeah, and I think just low income households just may use whatever's kind of available. Like I do think the sort of research on people in poverty and low income households generally shows that like they're going to use what they can now and kind of worry about it later. And I don't mean that in a like they can't people with low incomes can't plan. I mean it in a way that's like if you're facing immediate instability, you're going to take the benefit you have now and use that and not draw on your electric bill. Like I just think it's the reality of living in poverty is you're going to use whatever resources you have at hand, and I don't think LIHEAP is set up to do that. So maybe it's like a split. At the beginning of the year, I guess I don't know a ton about how LIHEAP is administered on a granular basis, but like maybe you could choose your allocation at the beginning of the year and get like 60-40 or something like that. I don't know how that would work, but
or I just had the thought, and again, might be beyond like our charge here, like more than we could reasonably recommend here, but it strikes me that it's like, I wonder if we could, as a state, get out, because obviously federal stuff is, our delegation can only do so much. But with the state fundings, I wonder if there's opportunity to develop like an electric, basically assistance on the electric front that you could couple with LIHEAP funding for your fossil fuel stuff. You get LIHEAP for your oil, and then you get some sort of like electric discount or something for a heat pump.
And I guess I'd say there is an electric assistance for a lot of things, but I do think like the GMP customers. I mean, it's not all of the state's customers.
Yeah,
but again, I think it's different. It's not just a discount. It's like we will pay for this up front. Like I think it recognizes that it's not just cheaper. It's you don't have the money to heat your house, and this is an emergency resource. So I don't know that a discount is actually the solution in this particular case.
Right, it would need to be equal to LIHEAP to make it attractive. It would have to be free, basically. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we just kind of call it out and let someone else figure it out. You know what I mean? Like I think us pointing it out is good. It's a good start.
Yeah, and I think the cooling thing is going to have more relevance as it goes on. Like that's becoming like a life-saving thing. We're not that far off from that. And I think, every year a few people die in Vermont from heat exposure. Like it does still happen here. And, I think it's going to become worse. And so, yeah, that is going to be a real problem where cooling is going to be becoming as important as I think other states have. Like I think southern states have LIHEAP for cooling. Like I do think that's a thing, but again, I don't know how the switch works. And if you're in a southern state, you might be okay with electric resistance heating and cooling, like if you're just not drawing as much heat basically. So I don't know how that works in practice.
I wonder if we have a section, I don't know if Chris touched upon it in his manufactured home section, but just talking about the fact that, it does go hand in hand with the fact that mobile home residents are, not able to take advantage of heat pump technology unless it's like a ducted system. They're more difficult. So basically they are limited to, like for cooling, they're limited to a traditional window AC unit. potentially that is, more expensive to run and stuff, and having more poorly insulated homes sort of gets into that technical aspects of the mobile home conversation. I suppose that could be added after that section's done, but it would be a good, like, reducing thermal stress on that population would be a benefit of being able to take advantage of, or something they're missing out on, I should say.
No, I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with that section. I think we touched on some of those threads, and yeah, it's kind of like a magnification of all the other problems that are swirling through here. So that'll be interesting to see. Okay, so I mean, I think some of this needs to be cleaned, and then let's just see.
On this next section, I just wanted to give context on, I touched on this in the moderate income section, but included it more as like a harm, was that customer confusion is definitely a possibility under the clean heat standard, and the importance of market transformation activities that basically the importance of like customer experience and the ease of being able to navigate existing programs. And so I think this recommendation's a little bit more specific than the harm I outlined with the energy navigators, but I think this section's really important, especially for the low income section. It aligns with the moderate income section. So yeah.
Okay, so let me just say, I think these are maybe two separate things. So maybe we break them out. Like, I don't know that, well, I don't know. I mean, so we have a thing, I'm trying to think. So in harms, we have an eligibility gap, which I think is just it's just not clear. Like, I think I'm just saying, so you might miss out on programs even if you're low income, but not like low income enough for the clean heat standard. But I think also it's just confusion, like what are people eligible for? I mean, because right now you could be eligible for WAP, and then I mean, maybe this doesn't reach the consumer level, but like you'd be eligible for WAP, but not WAP related to the clean heat standard. And there's already stuff like that going on, I think, to an extent. But so I don't know. Maybe the confusion will be felt more in the moderate income space. It depends. I mean, it depends. I think if low income households are going through WAP, which the details are kind of worked out behind the scenes, or if they're navigating the marketplace, which we know happens. So I don't know.
I would say it's definitely both. Like I know that Efficiency Vermont does receive a lot of, not a lot, but a number of low income applicants, and there's a lot of like redirect and sharing different opportunities in the state. And so I think that even though, and I think that also like being able to navigate where to go. So I think the customer confusion mixed with like customer experience is especially important for low income, knowing that not sure where to go. So yeah, I would say like equal, if not more emphasis on this for low income compared to moderate income is important. And then I do think that it's like similar, but I'm fine with separating it, like the program alignment and consumer navigation, because I think that program alignment's part of consumer navigation. And
we can put it back together. That's fine. I didn't know
no,
if it was...
I'm fine with it separated. I think I'm still thinking through it, because I think program alignment also is part of expanding existing programs and making sure that like, yeah, you're not expanding a program in a way that creates overlap, and that's part of customer confusion when there's the same opportunity in multiple organizations. And that creates a lot of customer confusion, and that's, I think, really bad for the market in terms of inefficiencies.
For sure.
Do you think maybe we should cut up program alignment and put it like at the top so it makes sense when we say increase funding of like why we don't want like I'm just wondering if it like if we've kind of said like, oh, increase these and make sure you don't duplicate programs to make it like more complicated. So maybe this kind of goes up and just says like you need to align things going forward, and then when you expand them, you're not recreating the wheel. So does that sound like that might work?
I think that narrative makes a lot of sense. And then I think I'm not sure if like there's a sentence in consumer navigation or in that first part in program alignment that talks about the inefficiency of like either expanding or creating a program that's duplicative, but I think that that's important to call out in this section or in one of those three sections. But
yeah, I'm trying to think because we've got navigation. So I think we could just mention it again, just say like speaks to the importance of keeping programs sort of I don't know, streamlined, I guess, to the extent possible.
Reduce overlap between existing programs, I guess.
which will
Yeah.
reduce customer confusion and increase program uptake ultimately.
Wait, reducing program overlap, which will reduce confusion and increase uptake. Let's see. Okay. Is this whole thing, I'm just thinking about an opportunity to deliver aid to households could be to utilize the existing systems in place of the utilities. That just seems like a thing, that's a recommendation that I don't know. Like, I think we should either explain what we mean or get rid of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know. I mean, yeah, I'd say get rid of it. It's just
Okay.
yeah, like there's a ton of programs through, you know what I mean? So it's like I don't think we need to like randomly just cite. Also, I'm not sure the EPA funding.
Yeah,
Comment.
I was wondering about that. There's money, but not really for that. I do think it could help residents take advantage of like if Inflation Reduction Act funds. I think that will be a big thing. Like this, I mean, I think like Efficiency Vermont and others will sort of be helping with that. But yeah, I mean, it's not, I think the consumer is not super well informed about like vague things that have been said about everybody gets a $14,000 discount on a heat pump and like what the HERE program is and how that's actually gonna work. So I'm fine saying like Inflation Reduction Act, but I don't know that navigators could be supported with new EPA funds.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know of any
Especially not
EPA.
EPA. Yeah.
I did cite like existing ways in the state that there are ways to do this. So I think that recommendation is fine. I do think it says a key recommendation. I would just say a recommendation so that the person reading this isn't like, oh, this is the main recommendation of the report. But that's kind of nitpicky.
I also wonder. I think we're talking about here energy navigators like at the Department of Public Service. Because I know there's energy navigators at the cap agencies right now.
That's what I was thinking. They were
It's-
probably talking about. Is that program like sunsetting?
Yeah, it might be.
I think
Um,
Jen was doing that work, and then she said her contract is over. But I don't know what her arrangement with CVOEO was at the time. So
right.
so we could say to maybe establish or continue to fund.
Yeah, yeah, that would probably be good because I know in the past there's been I think recommendations to get energy navigators at the Department of Public Service that are available via a hotline or something, but that did not go through. So, and then I think in lieu of that, there was these energy navigators at the cap agencies that I think was grant funded. I remember reading about it a couple weeks ago. I forgot who was funding it, but
I might put a plug in this section and we can ask Jeff to add this, but the details of this, but in the moderate income section, I did kind of put a plug to like, here's how the moderate income programs are supporting this navigation. And I think maybe like, I know that the low income weatherization programs, the agencies do navigation, like they're doing work to ensure the people, the Vermonters who need to go through their program have access and are aware of their programs. So I'm not sure of the details because I'm not as familiar with those programs, but I think like adding a plug for those details might be
they're
helpful here.
efficiency coaches. They're called. They're actually funded through Efficiency Vermont.
Okay.
So it's like all the cap agencies have at least one. I'm pretty sure some actually have two, but they're like basically, they're employees of like, Capstone or Sevca or whoever, but it's like 100% funded through EVT. And they do the initial visits, they do the light bulbs, questionnaire and stuff, and then they do administer Efficiency Vermont measures for reducing electric load, which like if they have an existing electric resistance hot water tank, they can get them a hot water heat pump water heater, or if they have existing baseboard, then they're eligible to get a cold climate heat pump, and then they get sent to the weatherization program to go through that whole system.
I think that's a really important piece to let the audience of this report aware of, that's another really important aspect to this work that needs to be continued to be funded in the expansion of these programs if we want incremental work to occur.
Yep.
So like, what does that text look like? That sounds like a good suggestion, but are you like, I guess, could you repeat what you're saying is like the recommendation, Emily?
It's not, Ben, I'm unfortunately less familiar with
Sure.
that. Could you maybe, I think like my language, I don't have the language that Ben had in the details of that, but I think like including Ben's language and saying like the EAG recognizes that this work currently ongoing in the agencies, and then use Ben's language, is critical as if these programs get funded or expanded to ensure incremental work happens based on the importance of this.
Yeah, so we have in there continue to fund energy.
Okay, support for this is.
Should we say energy efficiency coach or? Yeah, I think they're called energy efficiency coaches, or is it efficiency coach? I'm blanking on the exact title, but yeah, basically we're saying that we need to continue funding, because right now there is funding that is being sent to Efficiency Vermont to fund those positions. And I think it's crucial because basically they set the stage for the consumer. They educate them on like what's happening basically, because it's a pretty invasive process when you go through the weatherization program. It's like you're opening your home to potentially like a week's worth of like tearing your house apart to insulate it.
It is a energy efficiency coach.
Okay.
Based on the internet.
Yeah. Sounds right. Yeah.
But I can also, I'm sure Jeff has more information, but I can reach out to the folks that work on that funding stream and see if I have any information to add before Tuesday's EAG meeting.
I don't even know if we'll discuss this at Tuesday. I think we have enough some time for this to gel a little bit, so we'll figure out a way to kind of get these changes in. We can see if we like that.
And let's add in there, like we just wrote, Mia, maybe this work is currently being done at the community action agencies with funding from Efficiency Vermont, because that's what is happening. Basically, they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for EVT.
Yeah. Okay. So continue to fund and expand. Maybe we should just say to just expand support, like expand and sustain support for energy efficiency coaches who can guide Vermonters, particularly low-income residents, through the available incentives programs. Work is currently being done in community action agencies with funding for support. This hands-on support is vital to guide low-income households through the complicated process of. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, I do think there's a thing there, and I don't know about. I don't want us to get too in the weeds, but like households that are just above WAP eligibility could still benefit from some of the homes in here stuff. That's, well, not the homes one because I think that's all low income, but the here moderate income programs, and that is going to be hard. And even some of the stuff is in like tax credits, which is not usually helpful for low income households, but you never know, and that could be I think coaching.
I think the energy navigators that like Jen was serving in that role at Capstone or CVOEO, I'm pretty sure they have different income thresholds.
Oh, okay.
When I was at Sevco, we had one, and yeah, I remember having a conversation with him, being like, "You're basically doing the same thing that we are. Like, what's up with that?" And he was like, "Oh no, like I actually do." And there's a whole list of kind of extra stuff and it's folks that weren't coming through our program, like in the weatherization department. It was folks that it sounded like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it sounded like folks that are in that 80 to 120 range. And they had funding to basically connect them. They educated them about electric vehicles, but also heat pumps, and I think they did have some funding to implement 1 or 2 measures at their homes.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I did add some language into the moderate income section around how, in defining moderate income, like Efficiency Vermont has some anecdotal information around how like there's a number of moderate income Vermonters who oftentimes multiple times within a couple of years fall below the moderate income requirement, and how oftentimes that like lower bracket of moderate income is very fluid in between multiple. So just flagging that was called out in that section.
I'm glad you include that, because I've seen people get denied for the weatherization program because they made like, literally, we had somebody that got denied because they made $1 over the limit. It was the worst phone call to tell that person they didn't qualify, because it's like, oh, like, sorry, you worked like 1 hour too long last year. Yeah. On the flip side of that, if you are due to dip into that low income category and you apply, you can get into the weatherization program, and then even if like you do go back above that threshold, shortly after applying, you still are locked in because your income is verified for a 2-year window, or actually it might be a year. Sorry. So yeah, there's some nuances there, but I'm glad you included that, because
that's a good point. We see that in affordable housing with the sort of benefits cliff thing. Yeah, I think there's some hold harmless stuff for some of our programs where it's like your income can go up somewhat, but it is always hard to balance that. Okay, I think that, yeah, that's so. Okay, so I'm seeing, we're coming up on time. Like, so basically, like this section needs to be, like basically, think we just need to, I'm just going to put a comment. So clean up increased funding topic umbrella, including WAP, LIHEAP specifics. Okay, so we'll do that, and then and then I might just see if Jeff can do some of this, and then I think the LIHEAP and the WAP has a lot of good stuff in it, but it's kind of a mess. There's a lot in there. Yeah. Oh, I did want to delete this one thing now that we're seeing it, because Casey highlighted it, and I just don't know about.
Jeff called that out, I think, too, in
Yeah.
a comment. He said it wasn't necessarily true, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna delete that if that's okay. I don't know where some of this stuff. I think like it's going through conversations and then
it's taken out of context. Yeah.
Yeah.
There also is a bunch of stuff in here, so I think I shared it a couple weeks ago. But there's been a lot happening the last couple weeks. So I don't blame you guys if you don't remember. But there's this whole section about like vermiculite, all that. I wrote like, so my section on household is supposed to be households and homes not able to access clean heat standard measures. I did focus on like vermiculite, knob and tube, like in kind of more cohesive paragraphs and stuff. So I don't know. That might be. This is talking about the weatherization program, though, like specifically. I don't know. There's going to be some overlap there. I'm
I think we
reviewing
could,
this section anyway,
yeah.
so yeah.
I think we could definitely trim some of it and just nod to like, households that I'll put a comment in here like and that yeah I think that section will be in front of this one probably, so I think we can just say remove, so I'll just say mention structural barriers, but reference
Above section.
section above for details. Okay, I think that's going to be better. Yeah, I mean, I think someone just has to look through like some of this because, like, yeah, I'm also going to say, I'll just say,
Yeah,
like,
I'm assigned to reviewing this
yeah,
section. So
yeah.
I don't know if Jeff is going to take another crack at this, or if, I mean, I guess the ball's in my court now to sort through this one.
I'll basically send him a copy of this and I can CC both of you and just be like, this needs some pretty intense structural support. So we're just going to need to figure out how to make this work. But I mean, I think we did, like, a lot of this is just like making it more coherent, like and expanding on some of the stuff we highlighted. But I do think we've made some good progress at trimming away stuff that's like nonsensical or non-workable and kind of narrowing it down. So I do think we've made some good progress on this. I did wonder one of the things, I don't know if we should talk about it in the challenges. It's not really a recommendation. I mean, I think the bright spot of the clean heat standard is that the weatherization program is going to see, I think, a nice funding boost, should it happen and stuff. I don't know. Like, I do think there is some interesting stuff that could come out of that because the credits I suspect are going to be so valuable that like WAP will be able to get a good price for doing it, and especially on the scarcity of those credits. But I just don't know. I mean, like, maybe we just mention that, I could draft some text. It's not a challenge. It's kind of a benefit, but I mean, maybe that goes in the benefit sections just to say that like it's always been a challenge to get funding for low income households to be sufficient, and like this is a potentially really strong revenue stream that would extend out through 2050 or however the modeled one. So maybe we just mention that in the section, like, some programs actually do benefit. It's just, you can't reach all the households with them. But okay, if you could put that
We
in.
can talk about that in
Yeah.
in my benefits section, just because I was, if I'm honest, writing the benefits section was a little challenging because it's like, I don't know, this is not going to be a lot easier to write the harm section, but I think, yeah, focusing on, the weatherization assistance program, additional funding would be a good bright spot there because, yeah, that pretty much everything you just said. I'll write a paragraph about it. I can, because, the IRA funding is going to end in 2032. What happens after that? So yeah, a discussion around that will be good.
Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning. I mean, this is, I guess an alternate program may deal with that, but we don't know what that involves. And yeah, I just think long-term WAP funding is a pretty huge challenge that we don't really have an answer for. That's not the clean heat standard essentially, or something,
Right. Yep.
Okay, so let's okay, so I'll kind of get this back into Word, just because I don't like to keep it in this form, and then I'll send it to Ben and Jeff and kind of just encourage you to. I mean, if Jeff doesn't know what we meant by some of this red text, I think that's where Ben, you may come in handy by like being able to elaborate on some of these suggestions. But I do think I will ask Jeff to where some of the comments where he's like, that's not true, or like, no, that's confusing. Like, I hope he just is able to update that text because he's the expert in a lot of this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, this meaty section here that we're just talking about, I think would be, I would love for Jeff to kind of go through this because he knows all the, the average cost of vermiculite removal. I had reached out, I gave Jeff a list of, I think it was pursuant to a conversation we had, I think at the beginning of October in our full EAG meeting. I had met with Jeff I requested like a list of stuff, basically, our data from his program that we needed for their final report. And in that was included like average cost of vermiculite removal, basically tangible data that I know they have that they can dig out and like so that we can like say, hey, like it costs $20,000 instead of just like saying it costs between $10,000 and $20,000, which is true, but it needs to be cited.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and let me just so I think we could do this without another meeting on this one, and I actually don't know. I'm just pulling up my calendar. I don't know that we're going to have another meeting on this. Let's see. So we've got a regular equity advisory group on Tuesday where we're hopefully going to be reviewing sections and approving it. Then we have another EAG meeting the next week because we are taking the week of the 25th off because of Thanksgiving. We thought we wouldn't make quorum. So we've maybe got a report writing session on the 4th that I think could be used for any last like dust ups that come up in those sections where like we couldn't come to an agreement. And then I don't know, like maybe on we have it on the 18th, but then the same time we have a meeting on the an off cycle meeting. So this is, I think, probably the last, I mean, we'll keep it on the books, but I think this is probably the last report writing section that's not sort of an emergency, like we could not figure this out in a group or over sort of the editing process we've set up, and we need a plan to sort of plug the hole in that. But
yeah, do we want to maybe keep like, I mean, I agree with what you just said, but I'm envisioning, unless you're planning on like, how are we going to put it all together? Like, we need to physically put it on the same document.
And formatting.
Or formatting should be a bear, because right now it's all over the place. So
yes, I do have the intern help for this. I'm not sure about her schedule. It really depends, but I may sort of work with her on like just like cleaning up the references and stuff. So yeah, I think I'll end up doing a lot of that and having the final touch on making sure that like something weird has not happened with citations, which I've noticed Word does not like Google Docs, and it's pretty aggressive at like messing up the citations. But yeah, I think if we can get content in a place, I think me or the intern can handle sort of a final touch, cleaning up of citations and stuff. But we are just going to have to get rid of like data placeholder references. So we'll just have to see how some of that shakes out. But I do think we're in a decent place to get this done. I mean, we'll see how people submit, pieces, but like it is coming together, and we've gotten a few of the really blockbuster sections like this in decent shape, and the renter section in decent shape. So
yep. Yeah, I think I sent you a message earlier. I'm not going to have the benefits and recommendations section done today.
That's okay.
Because I'm really trying to be as comprehensive as possible. That it's kind of a bigger section.
No, it's super important, that section. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember, am I supposed to, sorry, I can't remember who is assigned to do what, but do you remember who,
let me see. Let's see. Oh, I think Matt was going to, I'll let him know.
Okay.
I'm not going to have that section done.
I can review it too. I mean, I think it's more eyes are better than fewer. And, that saves time if we come to our full group meetings with like cohesive suggestions if people have actually reviewed the material. So, yeah, that sounds fine. And yeah, I'll definitely be taking a look at kind of everything in the the end of it. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, I only have 2 minutes left. John, I'll just make sure we do one last public comment. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Sorry, I only left you 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. And we will have our regular EAG meeting next week. Otherwise, I will call this to a close. Emily, Ben, always appreciate your contributions to this long meeting, but I think we've done really great work.
Right back at you, Mia.
Yeah, thank
Talk
you.
to you all later. Thanks. Bye.
See ya.